Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another Historical Humans Reacts. And today we're going to be doing something just a little bit different. We're actually looking at something that was in the news very recently, where Harvard returned Standing Bear's Tomahawk to the Nebraska tribe. And we're going to talk about why this is significant and how this really impacts a lot of museums in the United States. So, for some background, a tomahawk that was once owned by Chief Standing Bear, a pioneering Native American civil rights leader, has been returned to his tribe after being housed for decades in the Peabody Museum at Harvard University.
Yeah. The tribe in question is the Ponca tribes of Nebraska and Oklahoma, uh, who went there on the 3rd of June, just a month ago, for the return of the artifact. This is a it's a pretty big deal. A lot of places usually don't give things back, regardless of how they got them. And well, as we sort of look at this tomahawk actually wasn't acquired through the usual illegitimate or what we would consider brutish means.
Nefarious.
Yeah, this tomahawk was a gift from Chief Standing Bear to his lawyer after he won a 1879 court case known as Standing Bear versus Crook, uh, which marked the first time that a U.S. federal court had acknowledged Native Americans as human beings with rights.
In 1879.
Yes, this country had existed for about a century.
Yeah, so this tomahawk was gifted to the lawyer, and the lawyer eventually passed away and exchanged hands a few times before it ended up in the collections at Harvard.
Yeah, yeah. As opposed to the usual method of just taking it directly from the Native Americans or they're dead.
And what's kind of cool about this is one of Standing Bear's descendants, Stacy Larrivee, who is also the historic preservation officer of the Ponca tribe, is the one who is receiving the tomahawk and who agreed to this. So there really is that personal connection between her and her ancestor.
Yeah, yeah. It's coming back to the family in a very literal sense. Not even just the figurative tribal family, but literally his direct descendants.
But it's a huge important moment because a lot of museums and a lot of collections have this ethical debate about their collections and about stuff of people who were oppressed or who had a lot of the historical trauma, especially with indigenous um, peoples and tribes of North America, because a lot of their ancestral items are in these collections. They're used more for study than they are for, personal reasonings. And it's a huge step because these things are very seldom returned. And for Harvard to be willing to do this is great, except
Yeah,
it's not.
yeah. And I will say that this the tomahawk was supposed to be returned last year. However, the nightmare that is the plague had delayed it by a full year so that it could be safe for the delegates to travel to receive the artifact. Because the last thing we want is to literally be killing people over this stuff again.
But the reason why this has kind of a dark connotation is because of this lovely article that's linked, which is actually written in the Harvard Crimson, their school's newspaper. So this is actual student writers talking about it. And one of the things that they highlight are the over 7,000 Native American remains in their collections. And the fact that despite federal legislation that calls for the repatriation of indigenous remains that was signed in 1990, a lot of collections and a lot of museums are very slow to this process. And this article here basically calls out the university because they returned the tomahawk before they even went through the process that's been ongoing for years of returning these human remains.
Yeah.
I think I sum that up fairly well.
Yeah, yeah. It's been 32 years since the law said you can't have this anymore. And, well, at some point, there has to be consequences. The article does mention Harvard's own committee has an unofficial report on the subject saying that, yes, you need to give this back to its descendants. You need to give all of them back.
And
But
the,
that report remains unofficial.
and even the university's president, Lawrence S. Bacow, apologized for Harvard's role in collection practices that place the academic enterprise above respect for the dead and human decency,
Yeah.
while still not doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a stronger wording comes from the people on the committee in their drafted report on the remains, where they state that speaking, of course, as a member of Harvard, our collection of these particular human remains is a striking representation of structural and institutional racism and its long half-life.
Well, and they also
Because
later go on to say, for too long, these remains have been separated from their individuality, their history, and their communities. To restore those connections will require further provenance research and community consultation. In addition, research might include DNA or other analysis for the express purposes of identifying lineal descendants, which is problematic to say the least, considering that most indigenous communities refuse DNA sampling and testing.
yeah. However, what's equally problematic is you've got a hold of of was it 7,000
Yeah, 7,000.
Native American remains, and you don't have the paperwork on where you took them from.
That's a very pragmatic approach. Yeah, you're right.
Nobody wrote that down in the what 500 years of your existence. No one wrote that down, Harvard.
I think that's a good insight into the legitimacy of where their collections were sourced. I'm sure they have documentation on at least some, if not, I hope most. But a lot of these collections were brought in by professors, and very seldom were they questioned about their provenance, as they put it.
Yeah. I'm just saying, this is a school that requires you to, put in an entire ream of paper for your application, and they can't put a sticky note down saying where they get stuff.
Yeah, that application process.
I just want to ream on Harvard for a little bit here.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm still upset.
Yeah. Told you you shouldn't have tried for him.
Hey, you know what? I'm too good for Harvard.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's kind of a good point to stop here, though. I mean, there's a lot of ethical debates and a lot of conversations that are being had about what these institutions should do with these collections, how they should best represent the indigenous communities with them, and also just straight up what they need to do. And this is a great indication of a step in the right direction of them actually repatriating these goods. But it very much is a slap in the face when you consider that they still house a collection of over 22,000 individuals, 7,000 of which are indigenous, and they're dragging their feet on the repatriation. It's like you have the ability to repatriate, but you're just not doing it.
Yeah, and I will say it is nice to see the Tomahawk go back, because given the circumstances around the Tomahawk, aside from its very clear historical and cultural purpose, it's one of those things that the way they got it, a lawsuit might not be able to dislodge it from their grasp, as opposed to the indigenous remains, which it has been expressly illegal to have for 32 years.
Yes. But if you guys like the video, be sure to drop a like and subscribe to see our future content. And if you want to see us discuss a specific topic or go into a deep dive of something, let us know. This series is very malleable, and we're open to suggestions from you guys who check it out.